All right, hello. My name is Devin Hoover. I'm also eatchalkgetbig on Instagram, and I just wanted to go over a couple of the kind of basics of bending, basic terminology, what people mean when they say things, how to identify bolts, and kind of a primer on where to get started for someone who is interested in bending but doesn't really know where to start or what anything means. Because in bending and in grip, there's a lot of acronyms and shorthand, and they'll say things like, oh, it's this kind of a bolt, this kind of a steel, and to someone who doesn't really know what's going on, it can be really overwhelming. I just wanted to kind of go over the basics and also give a little bit about technique for double overhand, because that's something that can be trickier to learn and explain, and I have actually explained it to a couple of my friends, beginning benders, and it's I want to kind of go over a couple of issues that I see people having where they're really making it harder on themselves, and I want to be able to make it easier for people to bend rather than harder. So just to absolutely start at the bottom, helping people pick out the first nail they're going to bend. I have in front of me, you can't see it off camera, but a whole bunch of different types of nails, and I'll go over the differences, different lengths, and generally what to look for when you're trying to buy nails in the hardware store. Because it'd be kind of confusing, because most people, when they think of nails, they might think of like really tiny nails with the roof in for like sideboards or like hang a picture. And for the most part, the nails that people bend for, competitive steel bending, all that kind of thing, are much larger than the normal nails people would think of. So the very smallest end of the range, this is a 20 penny nail. I believe it's 3/16 of an inch diameter, but it is only 4 inches long. This is about the shortest it's reasonable to bend. Beyond shorter than this, and you're really kind of cramped getting in there, it's difficult to get going. This is a great starter nail because it is not that difficult. However, because it's on the shorter side, it's not perfect for beginners. A really good nail that I recommend for most people to get started is something called a timber tie. This is a 6-inch nail, but it is twirly twisty. So this nail is the same length as a 60 penny nail, which a lot of people maybe in the bending world will talk about. Bending your first 60 penny nail is a bit of an achievement. That's usually kind of the old-time strongman nail. Well, someone will say, this is a big old nail, because it is a much larger nail than you're used to. For comparison, this is a 60 penny nail. This is a 40 penny nail. They're much larger. On the very other end of the spectrum, there's also 80 penny nails, which are 8 inches in length. And those are all, this is the size of my hand. These are pretty big nails for a lay person who doesn't bend steel, and people might not even consider this to be a nail because it's so tremendous. You wouldn't use this on a piece of wood. It would break it, it would splinter. But as a beginner, just starting out, the things that I recommend people starting out with are either the 20 penny nails. This is the 4-inch nails, sometimes called box nails or common nails, and then the 6-inch timber ties. In terms of difficulty, based on the Mike Krahling scale of difficulty of bends, this is going to be in the mid 150s, 160s or so, and this one's going to be around 200 pounds. And in contrast, a 60 penny nail is going to be around 300 pounds to bend. Just to give you an idea, this is a bend that I had failed previously, and this is just at 40 degrees, which is what would be a completed reverse or double underhand bend. But it's really not a lot of bend in the nail to quote unquote kink something. That's what the rating of steel is. There's generally 3 parts of bending a nail. There's the initial kink, where you get it from 0 degrees to 30 degrees. The sweep is kind of in between, and then the crush is once you can interlace your 2 fingers and clamp it down. But more of the basics first, just picking out nails. When you go to, we'll move on to bolts. The starter bolts you want to get to are grade 5, grade 8, and grade 2. The grade 5 and grade 8 bolts, you want to go for the 1/4 diameter. These are all the same length. and about the same diameter. For grade 2, you want to get the 5/16. So the order of difficulty of these actually goes 60 penny nail around 300, 320, grade 5 around 360 pounds to bend, sorry. The 5/16 grade 2 bolt and the 1/4 grade 8. In this order, and it is kind of confusing to look at the diameters because this one is so thick. Grade 2 bolts vary a lot more in their difficulty and they are easier steel, which is why you want the increased diameter. As far as picking out the different grades, I'm sorry if the camera was not going to focus real well, but you go based on the number of hash marks on it. So this grade 5 has 3 marks, grade 8 has 6 marks, and grade 2 doesn't have any marks. It's not focusing, but that's all right. The next kind of like milestone nail marker is going to be the red nail. This is a 5/16 grade 8, or sorry, a 5/16 piece of steel by 7 inches long, and it is going to be a bit longer than your 60 penny nail. So eventually you are going to have to get used to the difference in length. But for starting out, I'm just going to explain how to bend. 6 minutes into the video, talking a lot without showing you much. When people start bending, oftentimes when people start and like see me bend a nail up towards my chin, they'll get one and they'll try it and they'll try and kind of bend it and they'll sink lower and lower and they'll kind of be fighting with it down here almost. John Brookfield, who was the first person to bend a certify on the red nail, he certified by kind of bending like down here almost by his stomach, which is really impressive because that's actually making it a lot harder on yourself. Nathan Hull and his brothers, Nathan Hull is certified captain of crush number 4, but his brothers kind of figured out a better way to bend steel, which is up towards your neck, which eventually became known as double overhand. So for double overhand bend, you're really using your leverages more than just your wrist strength. When you're moving it, when you're doing a bend down here or away from you like this is all wrist strength right here. It's the same way you would do reverse or a double underhand bend. It's a lot of wrist strength. Whereas a lot of people can bend much more difficult steel, double overhand, because they're getting more of the shoulders and leverages into the bar. I usually will have my wraps be more towards the end of the bar rather than close up because this is not very much leverage, but this gives me more leverage further out on the bar. So this is a 60 penny nail that I've marked in the middle, as well as 1 3/4 inches from the either end. That way I can make sure my wraps are in a consistent, even spot. And if the wrap slips or anything, I can get it back on track where it needs to be. So when most people start bending, they'll maybe start up here, but as they start to go and exert pressure, if they lean forward down, they'll kind of like have the bar slip down their chest. And this is really just making it harder and harder on yourself. You want to keep it up high as possible under your neck, as if you were holding it with your neck up there. If it drops down below your chin, you're in trouble. You're making it harder on yourself. So one way to get practice of getting up here is to wrap up a nail that you can't do. For example, if you're at the 60 penny nail, find an IronMind red nail or something harder, something much harder that you're not expected to move, and just practice getting the nail up here and getting your shoulders tight. One of the best things to do is get your shoulders all the way back and tight. That way you can kind of elastic rubber band the force into the nail you're bending. JT recommends bringing the nail over your head, taking a deep breath to kind of hold that tension of like getting your arms and shoulders back so you can then drive into the bar this way. But again, you have to be careful that when you're bending over, you're not kind of losing it down your neck, down your body. Because again, if you bend things down here, over here, over here, behind your head or whatever, you're really losing a lot of the shoulder mechanics and leverage trying to get into the bar and really just working just on your wrist strength. So if it helps, practice in front of a mirror just with a bar that you can't bend, just bringing it up under your chin and getting your shoulders tight. Can't really see. Squeeze This did a much better video about how to get your shoulders tight with longer bars. Same thing applies to shorter bars as well, as far as like getting tight so that you can then unleash into the bar. These are leather wraps. I prefer them, different people prefer different things. This is a pair of brand new leather wraps I haven't used yet. I tend to bend with the textured side out towards my hands, a little more grip. This is the smooth side. This is the side I put the nail on. In contrast, this is a pair of suede wraps. These are much thinner and kind of textured on both sides. These are IronMind pads. These are the blue ones that you need to certify with IronMind on the red nail or the gold nail. These are, and this is the Fat Bastard Barbell Co. Cordura. These are both made of the same material. The Challenge Dude also has black Cordura pads just to kind of figure out what you're bending with. They won't always be color coded as far as the suede and leather, but generally 3 different materials you want to bend with: IronMind pads, suede, and leather. I happen to just like leather. I think it's a little bit more forgiving for beginners as far as pressure on your hands, and it's also easier to wrap tightly. If you're having trouble with wrapping, it's really great if you have a board or a table or something you can clip your wraps to then roll them tight. There's a different tutorial video on how to do that. If you don't have a board, you can just use your foot and kind of like wrap towards your foot as you go. What else do I want to talk about? Oh, just practicing the initial part of the bend. Because you really want to get it under your chin, under your neck, and kind of get tight in your back, and then unload forward into it. You're not really thinking about driving your elbows down so much as forward. The only reason you'd be driving it down is if you're bending forward and then driving your elbows down. But really you want to have your hands either fully on the wraps like this, or a little bit with your fingers on the bar itself. Different people prefer different things. I tend to like the bar, my hands just on the wrap this way. And then once you get in tight, once you are tight, I usually take a deep breath, pull my shoulders back as far as I can, hold as tight as I can on here, because you gotta actually use your grip to hold on to it. And then make sure you're keeping your wrists straight as you bend. One big mistake people make is they drive their elbows down and their wrists don't move. So even though your elbows are coming down, all the motion is going through your wrist when it should be going into the bar. Whereas you want to keep your wrist straight as you can, and have the bar move with you. Moving your wrist and your forearm and your hand as a unit down. That way you can kind of drive the power from your shoulders all the way down to your wrist into the bar. That's the one beginner mistake, is they kind of will have the elbows doing the right thing, back is all lined up, back is tight, but if you're not gripping the bar essentially with your wrist, keeping your wrists locked and straight, you're not going to be able to drive force into the nail. So that's why this involves so much wrist strength. What was the other thing I was going to mention? Hand placement. Anyway, so I'm going to bend this first bar, and I'm just basically just going to kink it, which, as I said, is that first 30 degrees. You want to pull tight up towards your chin, underneath your neck, and push down. And you're really just keeping your wrists locked and driving your elbows down this way. So this is a bar that has been kinked. I'm not going to measure it because that's a pain. Once you get there, through the kink, this bar is pretty bent. But in order to kink it, you don't need that shoulder mobility as much to get down, because it's getting down closer in, which is easier for people to kind of crunch down into. But it does help to kind of do the same kind of motion to slam into it. Because you're working with metal, the quicker you go, the hotter things are going to be as far as the steel, for example, when you snap steel. But you want to keep that same momentum going. The faster you bend something through the kink and the sweep, the easier it's going to be to then crush it as well, because you have that momentum carrying you through from the kink into the sweep. And if you kink it hard enough, you can even kind of bypass the sweep. But once it's here, you can kind of readjust, regrip, because this is the hard part, the kink. Bring it close keep it up towards your chin as much as possible. Just because you've done it, the kink doesn't mean you can kind of get it down here. You might want to like be muscling it, but you really want to keep it up as much as possible to use that back leverage as much as you can. So then once you've kinked it, you want to load up again for the sweep. Take a deep breath, get tight, get it up into your chin. You're not pushing into your chin, choking yourself, but you're just holding it up there as much as you can. Some ways to practice this are to like take a bar that you can't bend, put like elastic band on your foot so that you're really working to keep it up there, or a weight, something like that. It's really important to keep it up high towards your neck. And then do another hit to get it down a little bit further. This one can be a little more lenient. You can get over the bar a little bit and press down using more of your front of your shoulders and your chest. And then the point where your knuckles are starting to touch this way, you switch to the crush, which is where you can interlace your fingers. And you really want to focus on getting your fingers together first, and then almost squeezing your other fingers while you hold together and crush down the rest of the way. Some people will kind of hold the bar here while they're crushing, and then switch to this, or do one hand and then the other. I find it's really helpful to just wait until you actually can interlace your fingers all the way, and then wrap your hand, once your fingers interlace, wrap your hands around the nail to really get tight. This is where chalk is really helpful because it allows you to not only chalk the front of your hands, but the back as well, so that you can get that friction going with your fingers to kind of hold them tightly as well. When you go to crush the nail, and this is the same for any style, it's more of a chest motion than a back and shoulders. It can be kind of like setting a gripper if that's something you're used to, whereas you set a gripper, you do kind of one hand into the other close to your chest. It's that same mechanism. I have one over here. Same mechanism for as you would set a gripper in your hand. This is a sport, so it's really not a lot of work. You kind of bring it close underneath you and squeeze down this way for the crush. This is the same way you set a gripper, not with that technique, but the same way you would set a gripper to close, same way you would do practice chest crushes with the gripper in your hands, getting your hands tight, and then squeezing down into it this way. That's the same way you're going to crush down a bar. Get your fingers tight, use your chest muscles, crush it down that way. Now that the nail is completed, or the bend is completed, oftentimes one way to measure it is to measure between the ends. This is something that I messed up a whole bunch of times when I was just starting out. You want to measure from the inside of the nail head or the nail itself to the inside on 2 inches. I got confused a lot when I was first starting out, and I would measure from the outside of the nail and go, oh no, from the outside of the nail, I haven't finished, I failed this bend. But really, if you look from the inside to the inside, this is right at under 2 inches. So this is a completed nail bend. You can also use the markings to kind of see how on track you were as far as the evenness of a bend. So I was pretty even on this bend because this was an easy bend for me. A couple other more things I wanted to kind of cover is that the same mechanism of getting high under your chin works for longer bars as well. I have really long arms, so it's easier for me to get more leverage on larger things like the 80 penny nail. It's the same thing you want to get is in there. It's just difference between when you have a 6-inch bar, your hands will be a bit closer together. This is a 60 penny. Your hands will be closer together from the start, whereas with an 8-inch bar, your hands will be much further out. And this further out is what makes it more difficult for people to kind of get their back tight, because as they get their hands further and further out, it's hard to be able to get over the bar this way to actually start it going forward. So that's why 6 inches is a really good starting length with the timber tie and the 60 penny nail. Again, the timber tie is the twisty one, 60 penny is the straight one. Just because you can get a little bit closer in there as you're going, you're not having to worry about your hands and your shoulder placement going forward. if you are working on a tougher bend, it is okay to go into what's called doubles. This is IronMind pads on the inside and then leather on the outside. It's not a cheating thing to use extra wraps. It's just a different way of doing things. This is going to be harder in some respects because the leverages are different. This is also a longer bar, so it's going to force you even further out if that's what you're comfortable with. But depending on whether or not you're using leather or suede or IronMind pads, it's going to hurt your hands a little bit differently, and like you'll develop toughness in your skin differently. It's a matter of personal preference. I oftentimes will recommend beginners absolutely start their first nail with leather wraps, just so they're not worried about hurting their hands and they can get used to the movements. And then once you've got the movements down, switch to thinner wraps like the IronMind pads to kind of toughen up your hands and work on technique, because you'll feel the bar more. You're making it harder on yourself as well, so you have to worry about your technique going forward and making sure everything is kind of locked in. It's also how you would then certify on the IronMind red nail. Again, this is the IronMind red nail. It's painted red on the edges. You have to use IronMind pads, IronMind nails, and no rubber bands if you're going to certify. You also only have a 1 minute time limit. So that's what people want to be quick for things like that. A few other things going forward, I forgot to mention earlier, is as far as differentiating bolts, it's really important to make sure you know which bolt you're grabbed. I have them all separated out into different sections, but if you do get confused, make sure to check the bolt head. These two bolts look really similar. They're both 8 inches long, they're both 5/16, they're both silver. However, this is a grade 2 bolt and this is a grade 5 bolt. This is actually be a tall Edgin bolt, and this is just a grade 2. This rates about 300 pounds at 8 inches, whereas this rates about 500 pounds at 8 inches. And they look the same unless you look at the head marking. So be careful to make sure you've grabbed what you think you have. This is a triangle Edgin, grade 5. It has 3 markings. This doesn't have any markings, just some letters. If you need to practice that initial kink, that bend, you can get things like polycarbonate rods, something you can do over and over again. This is a piece of 5/8 polycarbonate rod that I've cut down to 7 inches. It's the same length as an IronMind red nail. And you can use this kind of as a reusable kink trainer, just to kind of practice that initial just like loading up, getting and putting force into the bar, and just watching it have a little bit of flex to it. It's not going to be a lot of flex. It's not something you can actually you would actually want to force down into the sweep and crush, because you will break it. But this is something that you can practice getting it up there, up under your chin, right up close under your, and worry about just getting a little bit of motion to practice getting tight in your shoulders, unloading into the bar, working at getting it close, loading into the bar. And you can see using something like this how much harder it is if you try it lower down, because then you're not using your shoulders, you're just using your wrists. If it helps, try and imagine like someone else is holding their finger underneath the bar as you're pressing down, preventing it from sliding down your chest. As I said earlier, you can look in a mirror. I have one over there, which is why I'm gesturing, and see at what you're doing as you're bending to make sure that everything is headed in the right direction. Sorry this video is so tremendously long. If you have any other questions about getting started, bending your first nail, questions about what to buy, how to do things, please reach out to me. I'm always happy to help others get started. As I said earlier at the beginning of the video, my username is eatchalkgetbig on Instagram. I'm available. Mostly Instagram is the best way to get hold of me, rather than like Discord or Facebook or anything else like that. But please reach out if you have any questions, and hopefully this helps somebody bend their first nail.